Welcome to Asia Pacific Defence Reporter, your go-to source for cutting-edge security insights in the region. Get ready for rapid-fire analysis and commentary from the Asia Pacific with your host, Kim Bergman.
Hello and welcome back from a very rainy Canberra. When you hear this, hopefully I'll be in the United States, and I'll have more to say about in the next podcast, which will be recorded from there. Now, before leaving, last week I put a couple of stories online on APDR, and I'll be looking into some more details of both of those. The first was that President Biden, through the Office of Management and Budget, has made an emergency appeal to Congress for about another $6 billion US, 9 billion Australian, to prop up the slowing construction of Virginia-class submarines. Now, that's received a little bit of coverage in Australia. The second story was about the government of Japan approving the sale of Mogami-class frigates to Australia for the C-3000 project, which I believe is an unprecedented step for the Japanese government. Japan has exported some items of military technology, mainly or exclusively to the United States, so this is quite an important step forward for them. The Japanese constitution, or rather, I have to choose my words carefully, the interpretation of the Japanese constitution makes it somewhat difficult for Japan to sell military equipment to other countries. Anyway, let's do this in order and think through what is going on with C-3000 and the general purpose frigate project. And I believe the government and Navy are now in grave danger of giving the government of Japan the expectation that they are certain to win C-3000. And by doing so, they are potentially creating a huge problem for the future government that will have to make the decision. Looking at the timeline, there's no way, except for one scenario that I'll come to, that a decision can be taken before the end of 2025. And this diplomatically, potentially very dangerous situation has come about in part because of the huge media blackout on the project, which I have discussed many times before. Now, a quick summary of the situation as I see it is this. The only thing that Japan is hearing, that the relationship with Australia has now been elevated to being on par with the Japan-US relationship and the Australia-US relationship. The originally deeply flawed Surface Fleet Review fairly much said that the only thing that mattered was speed to capability, having something in the water no matter what it was in 2029. This is irrespective of combat system, weapons, communications, all of the things that actually make a warship function. Now, thanks to the Japanese government statement announcing approval for a potential sale, we also have much more detail about the ship that Japan will be offering. And it is the larger, upgraded version of the Mogami frigate with a light weight of 4,800 tons, meaning that the full load will be around 6,000 tons and it'll be 145 meters in length. These dimensions are getting very close to what the original design of the Hunter-class frigate was, and the similarities continue. It has the same propulsion train, I've mentioned that before. It has a 5-inch gun, an embarked Seahawk helicopter. It will also have 32 vertical launch missile cells, absolutely identical to the Hunter-class. The Mogami has a number of advanced stealth features and high levels of automation, allowing the crew to be reduced to 90. That's for the current Mogami. I don't know if that's also for the enlarged version that Australia will be offered, the first of which of these will be delivered to the Japanese Navy in 2027. I've said previously I'm not sure how this matches up with the Australian procurement rules, which calls for an in-service design. If this is taken literally, then the only ship that Japan can actually offer is the current Mogami, which is 133 meters in length and has 16 vertical launch cells. However, for what it's worth, my impression is that Japan is hearing the basic message: we will take whatever it is that you are selling. And this case, for a variety of reasons, it will be the new Mogami, not the one currently in service, not the one that presumably has been evaluated. And we can debate endlessly about whether the bigger ship is simply a slight increase in size of the existing design, or whether it's something more complex than that. Now, by the way, if the same sort of flexibility is extended to Germany and ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems, I see no reason that rather than stick with the existing MEKO 200, which is about 30% smaller than the upgraded Mogami, and maybe TKMS instead is now free to offer the MEKO A210, which is a similar size to the upgraded Mogami and also has 32 VLS cells, could incorporate CFAR radars from CA technology, and will certainly come with a 9LV combat system. So you can see we are already a long way from what seems to have been the intention of C3000, but you cannot have one set of rules for Japan and another set of far more restrictive rules for Germany. Now, as well as the Japanese cabinet explaining some features of the bid, the procurement agency ATLA, which will be intimately involved in the projects, has also welcomed the shortlisting. Given Defence's attempted ban on anything being said by anyone about C3000, I really, really look forward to some Australian defence officials flying to Tokyo with some AFP officers in tow and attempting to arrest the entire Japanese cabinet and the senior ranks of ATLA. But to return to my main theme, if the RAN and Australia is so keen on the Mogami, if the government believes that the strategic relationship with Japan is so important, then why bother, frankly, with a time-wasting competition? Why not save all of the time and money when I say, if you have already made up your mind, then announce the decision now and get on with it? I don't know what the official attitude of TKMS is, because I can't talk to them, but I would be highly surprised if they would want to go ahead for the next 12 to 18 months, waste all of their money and waste all of that engineering effort if the decision has already been taken. However, if the competition is genuinely open, and if Australia that wants a warship that will actually be able to enter into service, by which I mean a warship that complies with all of our rules and regulations and has compatible communication suites and compatible combat systems, then the government and the RAN needs to start a process of expectation management, and it needs to have started last week. As I say, one of the mechanisms for running a healthy competition is to allow the companies the normal freedoms to talk about their bids, within the restrictions of commercial in confidence and some performance details. That way, a lot more is in the open about who is offering what, and the companies themselves have a far better idea of what they are up against. Conducting all of this under an umbrella of such total secrecy is counterproductive. Unless the pros and cons of both German and Japanese bids are open for discussion, an impression is being created in Tokyo that Australia is so enthusiastic about this deal for strategic reasons that it's going to happen no matter what. On the other hand, should this be a fair competition, and I'm starting to have my doubts, and ThyssenKrupp Marine System wins, because they are half the price for a higher level of capability, because they will have 9LV and CA radars, a future government is going to have a big problem explaining that to Tokyo. They will be in the position of saying, all that stuff we were telling you about the new strategic Japan-Australia-US dynamic? Well, none of that counts because we got a better commercial deal from Germany. I think that would be a difficult sell, particularly as feelings in Tokyo are still understandably bruised over the 2016 conventional submarine debacle, when an Australian Prime Minister had basically promised to his Japanese counterpart that they had the deal, and then that all was scrapped. So for that to work, for Australia to not run the risk of causing a major diplomatic ruction, the public narrative has to change, and it has to change now. And that's up to Navy and Defence. We don't know who the next Defence Minister is going to be in a hung parliament, and people have to start changing perceptions now. But since we're getting to the end of the year, let's reflect a bit on how we got into this mess in the first place. The current problems have been caused by the 9 Hunter-class frigates were meant to replace 8 Anzacs. That's a fantastic idea in principle, but already a dismal flop in terms of schedule, not necessarily capability. I accept the argument that when the now reduced order of 6 Hunter-class are delivered, they will be extremely good anti-submarine warfare ships. But it means that we have this, because of delays to the project, the Anzacs are going out of service slightly quicker than scheduled. Their replacements are being delayed. So that's why we've got to do something about it. Now, in the 2014-2015 period, Navy was offered a 4th Hobart-class air warfare destroyer. This was in the context of the Valley of Death occurring at the Osborne shipyard. And this was the perfect way, the simple, low-risk way of fixing that problem. But would you believe, basically, it was the Navy themselves who said, oh, no thanks, no, we don't want a 4th air warfare destroyer for reasons that have never been explained. Now, if that had gone ahead, even just that would have placed the Royal Australian Navy in a far better position than they are in now, because they would have had 4 rather than 3 air warfare destroyers. Those ships are performing very well. Now, if a 4th had been ordered in 2014 or 2015, that would have altered the dynamic for C-5000. Rather than buying the British ship, we would have been able to look at a continuous build of Hobart-class air warfare destroyers. They are, after all, Arleigh Burke clones, and we could have been churning out continuous batches of 3 slightly lengthened ones if you need to do so. Anyway, that didn't happen, obviously. Then we had the saga of the Lursen OPVs. I've described that at length. I'm not going to go through the whole sorry saga again, but I'll just remind people that when the Anzac frigate Hunter-class gap was apparent about 3 years ago, Navy should have sat down with Lursen and asked, hey, how can you help? We don't like the OPVs, but they're in production in Australia. You have an Australian supply chain. You have a functioning shipyard. What can you do? Lursen would have said, okay, we can come up with the perfect gap filler for you, 2,200-ton corvettes with CA radars and 16 vertical launch missile cells. Let's spend 6 months going through all of the features of the Arafura's that you don't like, fix all of that, and just roll straight away into the production of corvettes using what remains of the C-1180 project funding. A bit more might be required in the future. Anyway, that didn't happen. And you see, it's the same senior RAN and defence people with all their highly paid US advisors who just make mistake after mistake. In the absence of any real scrutiny, they have obviously convinced themselves and governments that they are geniuses and the rest of us are fools. Which is a very nice segue to the second big story I put online, the request for Virginia-class emergency funding in the United States. That emergency funding, by the way, also extends to the Columbia-class SSBNs, which, by the way, are an even higher priority for the United States Navy. Now, here at APDR, we have been reporting consistently on Virginia-class production line issues for the last couple of years, but it hasn't resonated in Australia because the government and the Navy, in the shape of the Australian Submarine Agency, keep bleating over and over again that the US is fully committed to the project. And that's what we got again just a few days ago. Asked about the emergency funding and Virginia construction slowing down, not speeding up. And by the way, that's a measurable fact, not just my opinion. All we have received from the ASA was the repetition of the total nonsense that America throwing more money at this is another demonstration of their commitment. Indeed, it is that, but it's also further evidence, if any were needed, that the entire program is struggling to lift its production rate. The United States Navy has said so, on the record. It has said the Virginia-class program is not where it needs to be. This is so simple, I can't understand why other people just don't get it. Let me be as blunt as possible. No increase in production rate, no submarines for Australia. Now, it's always possible that the production rate will increase. It's certainly no longer a matter of money. Enough of that is being thrown at it, including, Australia's $4.6 billion. But the fundamental question remains, will the production rate increase fast enough? When will it reach the required rate of 2.33 Virginia-class per year? And of course, the huge question that I keep asking, that keeps being avoided, is what happens if it doesn't reach that rate? Now, for what it's worth, I think the US has already prepared their lines for that eventuality. It might seem a bit subtle, but when outgoing Ambassador Caroline Kennedy spoke at the National Press Club last week, in answer to a question about alternatives to nuclear-powered submarines, that's alternatives for Australia, she said, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, she said, "This wasn't our idea, and we assume you have already looked into all of that. By the way, indeed, as we should have." So I predict this is how it's going to unfold, and keep this in the archives. In the event that a future Prime Minister or Defence Minister actually grows a spine and says to the US, "Where are our submarines? Doesn't look like they are coming. Can we please have our money back?" The answer is going to be, oh, no. This was all your idea. You want these things. We didn't ever ask for your $4.6 billion. You insisted on giving it to us. So, bad luck. This is all you're doing, not ours. We always made the preconditions clear, lifting our production rate and not cutting USN capabilities. None of this was ever secret. Goodbye. Thanks for all of your money. And of course, by then, all of the Australian personalities, Albo, Miles, Conroy, Meade, Hammond, will have retired. And a future inquiry into this multi-billion-dollar disaster, which is already cannibalizing other parts of the defence budget, will find missing records, poor memories, and all of the key people in retirement homes, surprisingly, no longer answering their mobile phones and no longer replying to emails. I'll conclude, as I started, by saying that I'm on my way to the United States. I'll be having a look at a number of projects of considerable interest to Australia, starting with F-35 Block 4 upgrades. So next time I'll describe those and hopefully some other interesting features. As always, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now, and see you next time.
That's today's Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. For more in-depth articles, expert opinions and exclusive interviews, visit AsiaPacificDefenceReporter.com. Stay informed, stay ahead. This is your source for all things defence. Until next time.